Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we are going to jump back in to one that we haven't done in a while. We're jumping back over to some German beers. And we are doing the same style from two different brewers. And today we've got a couple of Pilsners up on the docket, and they are both new to me. I have never had either of them. So the very first Pilsner is EKU Pils is the name of it, 4.9% ABV. I'll get into the history of this brewer, but suffice to say it was founded in 1872. Beer number two is Dinkel Acker's CD Pils, also a Pilsner, also 4.9% ABV, and they were founded in 1888. So two brewers that are very close to the founding date, been brewing for quite a while, and straight out of Germany, same ABVs. Both brewed under the strictures of the Deutsches Reinheitsgebot. And yeah, so we'll see what they're both about and see how they compare. Jumping right in, starting with the EKU Pils, 4.9% ABV. Okay, so jumping right in to beer number one of today's German Pilsner review. We've got the EKU Pils, 4.9% ABV. They were founded in 1872, and this is a subsidiary of Kulmbacher Brewery, based in Kulmbach, Germany. Now, EKU is an acronym. The letters don't directly translate to English, but what it actually stands for is Erste Kulmbacher Aktien Exportbier Brauerei, which in English means First Kulmbacher, meaning out of the city of Kulmbach. Aktien export beer is a little challenging to explain. Export beer is self-explanatory, but Aktien is a reference to a corporation that has shareholder interests. Aktien is much easier to say in German for its underlying meaning than it is in English. And then Brauerei is the German word for brewery. So kind of a mouthful, so they make it just EKU, but is a subsidiary of Kulmbacher. Nonetheless, in terms of bottle art, as anticipated, it's a German brewer. They tend to be very, very modest and conservative with their label art. This one, it looks nice. It's got a picture of some building. I don't know if that's a famous building in Kulmbach or if that's actually a picture of their brewery house there. I couldn't tell you, but it's nice. It looks clean. So let's get this one cracked. All right. As soon as I cracked it, I can just see the carbonation rising up in that glass, in the bottle rather. Looks great. Let's get this poured right in the glass. Beautiful looking Pilsner right away. Absolutely beautiful. All right. Okay. Visually, it's actually maybe a little bit lighter than the average German Pils, but not by much. This is really much more what I picture in my head when I think of a German or a Czech Pils. But I would say it falls right in line with standard appearance. As expected, there's a fair bit of carbonation activity, and it's very, very super fine bubbles. I didn't pour it particularly well in this glass. Honestly, it is challenging for heads unless it's a really large can or bottle I'm pouring. 12, and this is probably 11.2 ounces. It is. 11.2 ounces don't pour the greatest into this glass because it doesn't have quite as much in the bottle to give me enough room to get it done where it needs to when the glass starts to taper. But it looks great. Still formed a head. Not the standard lush creamy Pilsner head you expect on top, but it's really more a product of the limited volume in the bottle and the glassware with which I'm using. But it looks great. Let's give it a sniff. Oh, that smells so nice. It is a classic German Pilsner aroma. I can tell you, they do vary a bit in their aromas. This one has that honey sweetness. Very, very pronounced honey sweetness. You get a nice kind of sense of the underlying Pilsner malt backbone there as well, but the sweetness is really the dominant aroma with the malt bill kind of below it, and there's just a hint of a hop aroma. But the sweet is quite dominant, then the malts, then the bitters, and it's quite subtle. So let's go ahead and jump in for a sip and see what this is about. Oh, oh, that's a very nice Pilsner. That's a very nice Pilsner. Oh, oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Oh, it's just so clean. It's just so clean. God, German Pilsners and Czech Pilsners, they're the best in the world for my money. God, this is just another great example of why I believe that. Okay, so immediately you get it in your mouth and you start to move it around the palate. It gets ridiculously creamy as you would expect, which makes the mouth feel quite creamy and thick. The dominant flavor that you get in your mouth up front is a little malty sweetness, and it's just very, very honey-like, kind of almost like mead presents itself, where there's that honey flavor to it, or any kind of honey brown ale, or kind of beers that have a honey back. It does have that sensation to it. Then you get that beautiful classic German Pilsner malt bill. It's just as clean as could be. And then there's the bitters that come in on the back. So it really kind of comes in the same layers and in the same order of operations in the flavor as you could detect it in kind of intensity on the aroma. So what you smell really is very much what you get in the glass. Very, very clean, very, very well balanced. This is an excellent, excellent Pilsner. It's exceptionally well balanced and it is delicious. On the end of the sip, at the end of the finish, as you would expect, it does have a slight dryness to it. It's not super brute, it's like brute light. It's essentially a Pilsner finish. That is typical for the style, and I do actually expect that in my Pilsners. This checks off all the boxes for me. I'm gonna jump back in for another sip for body and mouthfeel and explore exactly how the flavors develop and how long this finishes out. The body is medium light, pretty much what I expect for the ABV range. The mouthfeel is super creamy. Yeah, the flavors develop exactly like I stated up front, and it's actually quite long from the onset sweetness and that honey flavor, and then the malt starts to come in and it marries with that honey, and that really kind of intensifies and it lingers there for a while. And when that starts to slowly decrease its intensity is where the bitters come in from the back and they start to intensify. And then they all kind of reach the same intensity level. That malty sweetness, that honey sweetness, that malt bill flavor, and the hop profile flavor. And then it's a very, very slow and long descent to the end. Each sip of this has a very, very long finish. And the dryness really comes on the palate at the near the final 10-15% of the finish of each sip. It's quite long. It's very, very enjoyable. This is an absolute fantastic Pilsner. It's a really, really well done example. I just love Pilsners. I really, really do. I love them every time. I love trying new ones, especially German and Czech Pilsners. This is a great one. I'm going to take my time sipping on this, come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get to beer number 2. That's the Dinkel Acker CD Pils, also 4.9% ABV. Okay, moving on to beer number 2 of today's German Pilsner review. We have got the Dinkel Acker CD Pils. As with the first, it's also 4.9% ABV. This one is based out of Stuttgart, Germany, and the brewer was founded in 1888. Yet again, another German beer, very subdued, nothing fancy on the label. It's just a clean design. That's nothing real interesting there, so to speak. So let's get this cracked. All right. Get this poured right into the glass. Oh, there it is. I'm going to see if I can be a bit more aggressive down the middle, try to encourage this to form a little more substantive head than the last. This is a tough glass. It's not the beer. It's probably a mix of my pouring and my glassware, but I like this glass for Pilsners. It does a good job. Looks nearly indistinguishable from the prior. Really, it's a lovely color. I'd say they're on the lighter end of the spectrum, but they're still perfectly in range. It's a lovely beer. Doesn't seem to be quite as active in terms of carbonation, but What I do see is very, very fine, very, very small bubbles yet again. That seemed to do the trick with the head. That's a classic Pilsner head, nice and creamy. Looks great. Let's give it a sniff. Okay, right away I can tell you that the aromas produced by these two beers are completely different. Completely different. There is no hint of sweetness or honey whatsoever. This smells very hop forward, hop dominant. I can smell the classic German Pilsner malt bill underneath this, but the hops are forward. So I expect this is going to be one of those classic German Pilsners that has a bit more hop bite to it, which I'm a big fan. I'm a hop head anyway. But I do expect that it's going to be quite a bit more pronounced than in the prior offering. But nonetheless, looks great. Head is still holding strong, and it's at a perfectly reasonable height. So let's jump in. Oh, that's nice. This is another very, very nice Pilsner. Very nice Pilsner. Um, no question, that sweetness that you get on the prior that came through in the aroma, you only get that on the front of this, which is very typical even for a very hop-forward Pilsner. Just due to the nature of the beast, you're going to get a slight sweetness on the front when you first get it in your mouth. This is no exception, but there's no hint of any kind of honey back. That sweetness gets out of the way immediately within the first second, and then the malt bill comes on strong. Within about the first 3 to 5 seconds, the bitterness starts to come in from the hops, and that starts to intensify, and it kind of melds with the malt bill, and then it kind of overtakes the malt bill in terms of intensity. The bitters linger. It's got a nice lingering bitter finish. I could say, while this does have a little bit of a classic dry Pilsner finish to it, it is not as pronounced as on the prior beer. It still very much tastes like a classic German Pilsner, has very much the same qualities, just slight deviations here. So completely different Pilsners and completely different Pilsner drinking experience. I'm going to jump back in for body and mouthfeel and explore fully how the finish wraps out here and these flavors develop. The body on this, I would say, is properly medium. It feels quite a bit more substantive than the prior beer. It's got more breadth to it. The mouthfeel, same classic Pilsner, and you start moving around the pellet, it gets ridiculously creamy. So, I mean, nearly indistinguishable in that regard. And the flavors, exactly as I described on first sip. And it's been quite a few seconds since I just took that last sip, and the bitters are still lingering around after the apex peak of all the flavor development. And it's bitters on top and malt underneath. No hint of sweetness thereafter. It's all malt and all bitters. And the bitters are the dominant on the end of the finish, really from about the halfway point all the way to the end. This one does have quite a bit longer finish than the prior. No question about it. The bitters linger around, and they really help the flavor of the beer stick around. And it mixes with the malt as well. So you get a mix of bitters from the hops, and you get a mix of the malt bill underneath it. And it's still going. It's got a very long finish. Very nice. It's still got a nice, crisp, clean finish, though it's not quite as dry as the prior, but still has that hint of it, which is very much classic Pilsner. Yet again, another beautifully, beautifully balanced Pilsner. I mean, it is just beautifully balanced. They don't always have to be sweet. They don't always have to be hoppy. They don't always have to be a mix of the two. So these two are really quite dichotomous. They're completely different, but fully well within range for what a Pilsner is, just on different ends of the spectrum. And they're both fantastic, and I think they're completely different and unique offerings within the same beer style, out of the same country, that maybe appeal to a different Pilsner drinker. So it's great. I have thoroughly enjoyed both of these today. I'm going to take my time sipping on this one, come up with my scores, and when we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both of these delicious German Pilsners, we're going to get them ranked. Starting with the EKU Pils, this one's 4.9% ABV. It is brewed by a subsidiary sidearm of Kulmbacher out of Kulmbach, Germany, founded in 1872. The aroma on this one, fantastic, very much classic Pilsner. You got that nice classic malty sweetness, then you got the standard Pilsner malt aroma that came through quite strongly. Wasn't really that heavy in terms of hops, but it smelled very nice, and that honey-like quality really paired well with the malt bill. Came through, you know, it was okay. It was above average, not high end. It wasn't super aggressive, but you could smell it without much effort. I give it a 7 out of 10. For the taste, I really enjoyed this beer. Honestly, I truly did. This is one of those, Pilsners can run really quite a big swing within the same style for the various interpretations that a brewer has. This was one of those that leaned more heavily on those kind of honey, sweet, malty side, but it still had all the classic breadth and flavor of a nice Pilsner malt bill. The hops weren't particularly present, but it did have a little bit of a bitter, nice classic flavor, really. Just kind of depends on which style and kind of flavor profile you like in your Pilsner. I enjoyed it very much. I only docked 1 point. I give it a 9 out of 10. The body was fantastic. It was exactly what I expected for a Pilsner out of Germany in this range, 10 out of 10. Mouthfeel, same thing. Had a perfect Pilsner mouthfeel, got ridiculously creamy when you roll it around the palate, and that dry finish, that for me is exactly what I expect in terms of mouthfeel. 10 out of 10. Finish. Finish on this beer was very long. Each sip lasted quite a long time, and all of the different elements kept growing and building and moving in and out of each other. Then a very slow, very even, steady descent all the way to the end, and then that dry finish on the end, just that classic dryness in the mouthfeel. It was fantastic, 10 out of 10. Head and retention, this one did okay. I wasn't as aggressive as I should have been for the glassware. It just did okay though, certainly above average, but it didn't have the retention I expected. Probably my fault, but I got to rate it appropriately. Give it a 7 out of 10. Appearance-wise, maybe a little lighter than standard, but certainly within range. I give it a 10 out of 10. Balance on this one. Really enjoyed this beer. I did think overall it was well balanced, but the classic kind of hop bite that you get from a Pilsner was very much missing in this. There was just that hint of bitters at the end, but it didn't have that bite. I did only give it a 7 out of 10, but still above average. Feeling in the intangible, I loved it. I love all types of Pilsners. I am a massive hophead, but I really appreciate the nice kind of honey sweet ones. And this was one of the best examples of the kind of profile that you can often get in Pilsners. It was very enjoyable. I give it a 10 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, I think this is a very excellent example of what a German Pilsner is. You know, they all do kind of run the gamut. Really for me, just a couple of areas where I would have liked it do a little better, a little more intensity to give it top marks, but I only docked 2 points overall. I gave it an 8 out of 10. That brings the total score on the EKU Pils to an 88 out of 100. So that's a very high score, certainly well above average, and one worth seeking. If you've never tried it, I do recommend it. Moving on to number 2. This is Dinkel Acker CD Pils, also 4.9% ABV. This one's out of Stuttgart, Germany, and this brewer has been brewing since 1888, so founded in 1888. Aroma on this one, completely different aroma profile, but in terms of intensity, it was essentially identical to the EKU. It gets the same score, it gets a 7. The taste on this one, very enjoyable, just as the EKU was, though completely different German Pilsner drinking experiences, where this one was really more focused on the kind of honey sweet side of the Pilsner. This was much more focused on the hop bitter bite side of the Pilsner. So completely different in the avenues, but still perfectly and legit falling in range of the style. I enjoyed this one very well. I docked 1 point on this one for the same reason I docked 1 point on this one. This one didn't have enough of a hoppy bite. This one was just kind of missing the subtlety of the sweetness. It was there and then gone. And the bitters just didn't come until the very end, and they were very muted. So it gets a 9 out of 10. Body on this, same as with the prior for the same reason. It was textbook, gets a 10 out of 10. Mouthfeel, essentially indistinguishable from the EKU. Same reasons it gets a 10 out of 10. Head and retention. Head and retention on this one was really quite nice. It did a very good job. It formed very beautiful, creamy, lush head, and it's stuck around for quite a while, even in that glass, which isn't the best. I like it for Pilsners, but it works better for taller, taller beers. More beer in the bottle. It's a little bit bigger glass, but I was a bit more aggressive. It formed well. I give it a 9 out of 10. Appearance-wise, just with the prior, maybe a little bit on the lighter end, but perfectly in range. It gets a 10 out of 10. Balance on this one. The balance on this one overall, I thought was excellent. I thought it was a little bit more well balanced than the prior. And even though I'm a massive hop head, I like the hoppier intensity Pilsners in general. This one was missing that kind of sweet side subtlety. So I did dock some points there. I give it an 8 out of 10. Feeling intangible, I loved it. I loved them both. Completely different ends of the spectrum within the same style. It gets a 10 out of 10. Example of the style. Just as with the EKU, I thought it was a really great example of what a German Pilsner is. There's a lot of variety within the same beer style. There's a lot of different ways that brewers can put their beers together, and it is still 100% a Pilsner. This one just went for the more hop-dominant route, which I really appreciate, but it was missing that sweet subtlety. And frankly, I would have liked even a little more of that malt bill play to come through. Same as with the EKU, I did dock 2 points. It gets an 8 out of 10. That brings the total score on the Dinkel Acker CD Pils to a 91 out of 100. So all total, just a 3-point spread here. These are both well above average German Pilsners. Absolutely well worth seeking if you've never had them. I got these two at Total Wine. Pretty easy to find if you live in a big metro area. Total Wine should have them. They import to the United States, certainly. Any decent bottle shop or place that gets German import beers ought to be able to get these on hand. Pretty popular. Nonetheless, folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And if you want to keep in the loop when our videos go live to YouTube, you can click the notification bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.